No doubt you've heard of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well as the DCEU.
Even Star Trek and Star Wars have their own universes.
Hell, even Universal tried it.
What the hell?
You know what else has a universe? GameSpot. And you're watching it.
Did you know that American Horror Story also shares a connected universe between all of its 7 seasons? Yep, we're talking about the AHSEU. The Ashu.
No, it's the Aseu.
Ashu.
Aseu. It's Aseu. Before we examine all the connections in this anthology series, be sure to subscribe for videos on all those aforementioned extended universes. That's right, we're covering your favorite Marvel, DC, and Star Wars movies, including an upcoming film that you might have heard of, The Last Jedi.
First off, let's start with the big picture. If you thought Sarah Paulson was the main connection between all 7 seasons, you should check out Ryan Murphy's Instagram account where he shares quite an interesting post.
Now, we can't confirm if Murphy wrote this himself or he's just sharing a fun theory, but we need to take it seriously. According to the post, American Horror Story mirrors the 9 circles of hell from Dante's Inferno. Those include limbo, lust, gluttony, greed, anger, heresy, violence, fraud, and treachery. Oh, and in case you're wondering, this series has been greenlit for 9 seasons, so we're betting that the next 2 seasons cover lust and violence.
Which is shocking because lust and violence has been in pretty much every season so far.
Pretty much, yeah.
Moving on, let's take a closer look at the connections between all the seasons, starting with location. The setting of American Horror Story is a common thread that we've observed throughout the series, specifically the great state of Massachusetts. In Murder House, the Harmons moved from Boston to LA. In Asylum, Briarcliff Manor was built there in 1908. Season 3's Coven storyline showed us flashbacks of colonial Massachusetts with the Salem witch trials, which would be present-day Danvers, Massachusetts. And Freak Show's Elsa Mars worked in a Boston circus in the 1930s. Massachusetts is also where Pepper lived prior to being committed to the asylum. Now this might be a stretch, but even in Hotel, James Marsh's accent was described as a Boston Brahmin accent, so it's possible that the serial killer was born in the Boston area.
We're all here now. Let's sit. Only so many hours in the night.
Roanoke and Colt were the only seasons that didn't have a more literal connection to Massachusetts. Now how about Florida? That's where Freak Show took place during the 1950s, but Murder House's Vivian Harmon also mentioned that she had a family in Florida. It's possible that Vivian was related to the doctor who Desiree visited in season 4. The doctor's daughter mentioned that she was also from Boston. Now they might not be sisters, but there's a chance they may be related.
Now that we've talked about the locations, let's talk about the characters themselves and how they connect to the whole story.
Starting with Lana Winters.
Now Winters, of course, is played by AHS veteran Sarah Paulson and has made a significant mark on the series. The investigative journalist is the star of Asylum. In 1964, Winters attempted to expose some of Briarcliff Manor's darkest secrets. Unfortunately, she was wrongly committed to the asylum and just barely survived a run-in with Bloodyface. She went on to release a tell-all book and documentary that would shut down the asylum in the early 1970s. Now, Winters would return, and in the present day, she was kind of a Barbara Walters type interviewer.
Yeah, she gave an interview with acquitted murderer at the time, Lee Harris, from Roanoke season finale.
Why did you agree to this interview?
What do you mean?
Well, I know for a fact that you turned everybody else down. Diane Sawyer, Barbara Walters.
But she didn't get all the big interviews. Winters tried to get a one-on-one with Paulson's Allie Mayfair Richards from the past season of Colt.
If she turned down Lana Winters, why would she talk to Rachel fucking Maddow?
Now, Allie declined the opportunity to share her story on how she escaped Kai Anderson's clown cult, probably because she had plans to start a cult of her own.
How about another character played by the awesome Sarah Paulson? Billie Dean Howard showed up in Murder House and Hotel. Back in season 1, she was the medium that Constance hired off Craigslist to help her get in contact with her son, Tate Langdon.
I've just come from a meeting at Lifetime. They're interested in making a pilot with me.
A Craigslist psychic with a Hollywood agent. Who'd have thought?
A medium.
Now this is also the time where we get our first mention of the lost colony of Roanoke.
In 1590, on the coast of what we now know as North Carolina, the entire colony of Roanoke, all 117 men, women, and children, died inexplicably.
This was neat foreshadowing for season 6, as we would see the events of Roanoke play out in flashbacks throughout the whole season. And despite Dean Howard's claim that simply saying Croatoan could banish unwanted spirits, Violet's attempt to get rid of Chad proved she was mistaken.
Croatoan!
Just kidding.
But that didn't stop her from getting a TV show, of course, because lots of people without talent are on TV.
Having a house is a huge responsibility.
A huge responsibility that I don't even think that you've realized.
Do you know how to do your own laundry?
No.
And lo and behold, years later in Hotel, she shows up to interview the ghost of John for the program. Unfortunately, a bunch of serial killing ghosts at the hotel weren't fans of the Lifetime show and eventually ran her out of the building.
You peel. He needs someone to talk to when we aren't here.
Another Roanoke connection, Edward Philippe Mott built the Big Shaker Mansion in 1792, the haunted house that Shelby and Matt Miller moved into at the beginning of Roanoke. What's really notable is that Edward is an ancestor of the Motts from Freak Show, including the serial killer Dandy who takes control of the Freak Show and his terrifying mom, Gloria.
How's that?
Better. The seat's warm.
Mother made a toasty for you.
Bottom line, all the Motts are fucked up.
Extremely. Now, a fan favorite over the 7 seasons has to be Pepper, and we were first introduced to her in Asylum, but it wasn't until Freak Show that we learned about how she ended up at Briarcliff Manor. In Freak Show, her and her husband Salty, get it, Pepper, Salty, were part of a double act in Elsa's Cabinet of Curiosities. Upon Salty's death and the disbanding of the circus, Pepper was sent to live with her sister and she was pretty much treated like a slave. Pepper's sister and brother-in-law were extremely horrible people and framed her for the murder of her infant nephew. That's how she ended up at Briarcliff Manor.
He took one look at the shape of my head, and I was locked up for good. That's how it works with us freaks. We get blamed for everything.
Now, if you paid real close attention to the past season of Cult, you may have noticed some of your favorite Freak Show performers on the cover of one of those Twisty comic books, including Pepper, Jimmy Darling, aka Lobster Boy, and Meep.
They loved me. The freaks were stealing them just like before. I knew what I had to do.
Now, speaking of Twisty, everyone loves this killer clown, especially you, Greg.
No, I do not.
Twisty was, of course, featured during Freak Show, and it looks like the details of his Florida murders during the 1950s were so well known that they were turned into literature. Well, comic books to be exact. In Colt's present-day Michigan, Allie and Ivy's son Ozzy is a big fan of the killer clown. But if they knew the comics were based on the real-life murders less than 70 years later, I'm not so sure they would let their son read it. Now, according to Ryan Murphy, Twisty is, quote, one of 4 mythological monsters, along with Bloody Face, Rubber Man, and Piggy Man. And believe us, they're all terrifying.
Bend them to thy will, shed their blood, release the power of the blood moon.
Okay, now it's not American Horror Story unless we talk about the witches. No, not that witch. Not that witch either. Yeah, there we go. The ancient witch Scathach, played by Lady Gaga in Roanoke, was worshipped by the evil Lost Colony matriarch, the Butcher. Now, according to Ryan Murphy himself, Scathach is also the OG Supreme, aka the very first Supreme ever. That's right, she predates the Coven storyline and Salem witches by centuries. Murphy has hinted of a Murder House Coven crossover season at some point, and that means we may once again see more of the Witch of the Woods.
Charles?
For God's sake, I'm working!
Another character with major connections throughout the series, Dr. Montgomery, aka Surgeon to the Stars. He's first seen in season 1's Murder House. Charles moved to LA with his wife Nora in 1922 and built the infamous house for her, but soon became addicted to illegal drugs and illegal abortions. Decades later on Coven, we were introduced to Madison Montgomery, who, like Charles and Nora, is also from LA. It's extremely likely that Madison is a descendant of the Dr. Frankenstein-like couple. Let's not forget that both Madison and Charles have both brought people back from the grave. That can't be a coincidence, right? Now in Hotel, Dr. Montgomery helped the Countess in a failed abortion attempt that would lead to the birth of Bartholomew, the child of Elizabeth and James March.
Speaking of doctors, let's not forget about Dr. Arthur Arden, aka Hans Gruber, aka one of the most evil characters in the entire series. Arden appeared in both Asylum and Freak Show, as well as Babe during a much happier time in his life.
That'll do, pig. That'll do.
All jokes aside, the Briarcliff doctor turned out to be a Nazi doctor who tortured and experimented on his victims. And he was the very same doctor to amputate Elsa Mars's legs while shooting a Nazi snuff film in the flashbacks during Freak Show. Elsa was forced to use wooden legs for the rest of her life. Fun fact, James Cromwell's son, John Cromwell, played the young Hans in season 2 as well as season 4. Poor Sister Mary Eunice. She thought she was doing noble work in the asylum until she was possessed by a demon during the exorcism of Jed. That's when she took a total 180. After getting Sister Jude committed, Mary Eunice took over as Briarcliff's head nun. She also showed up briefly in Freak Show as we learned the background of events that led to Pepper into the asylum. She too wrongly believed that Pepper committed the horrible acts of violence, but we all knew better.
Queenie, who we know and love from her voodoo witchcraft in Season 3's Coven, returned in a hotel after coming to LA to appear on The Price is Right. Sadly, she didn't make it to the game show after the vampire Ramona took a liking to her, and the ghost of James March stabbed her to death because her powers apparently don't work on ghosts.
You may be a witch, but I'm a ghost.
Now remember, Hotel Cortez houses a ton of spirits, so I'm fairly confident that we'll see Queenie once again should the show check back into the hotel at some point.
I'm looking for a Dr. Ben Harmon.
That's me.
Detective Jack Colquitt, LAPD. I need a moment of your time.
Now this one might be a stretch, but don't you think it's a little more than coincidence that both detectives in Murder House and Freak Show are named Jack Colquitt? There's nearly a 60-year time gap between them, so it's likely that they're related? Perhaps there's even a long-standing tradition of law enforcement in the family. Or this could be just some sort of inside joke, as American Horror Story producer James Wong directed an episode of The X-Files, in which the cigarette-smoking man wrote a novel titled Take a Chance, a Jack Colquitt Adventure.
This is a small one, but remember Marcy, the real estate agent from Season 1 who manages to sell the murder house to the Harmon family? By the way, the Harmons obviously never watched Eddie Murphy's Delirious.
I would have been in the house and said, oh, baby, this is beautiful. We got a chandelier hanging up here, kids outside playing. It's a beautiful neighborhood. We ain't got nothing to worry. I really love them. This is really nice. Get out. Too bad we can't stay, baby.
Well, Marcy popped up in Hotel as she tried to spin off the cursed hotel to an unsuspecting client. Also, that trip to the Cortez didn't end well for Marcy, as she was killed and forced to book an eternal stay at the hotel. Okay, we want to leave you with an interesting theory that we found on Reddit from a few years back.
And it makes even more sense with the recent connection to Dante's Inferno. It's from Redditor Scooter Smith. Scooter writes, what if American Horror Story is essentially hell for our stock cast? Functioning on something like a cyclical Truman Show. The cast are in hell and are being forced to go back through and live these traumatizing lives over and over again for the rest of eternity. And through their characters they've played through the various seasons, they all depict a representation of their sin they've committed through their original lifetime. That makes an awful lot of sense to me, and that would be an awesome way for them to connect all these seasons.
Mind blown. Guys, let us know what you think about that in the comment section down below, and make sure to hit that subscribe button while you're at it.
And if we missed anything else, any of these connections, let us know, call us out, but be nice, guys, please. See you soon.